My name's Ashley, and I just turned 32. Let me tell you, 32 is not looking cute on me right now. It's got this whole medicated and miserable vibe going on, which, ironically enough, is exactly what I used to make fun of my sister for. Tracy. My older sister, the one who's now, get this, a therapist. Like, you can't make this stuff up. It's almost funny if it wasn't my life crumbling around me. So, Tracy, right? She was always sensitive, fragile, almost. When we were kids, if you looked at her wrong, she'd burst into tears. And then, as she got older, it wasn't just tears. It was like everything was a thing. Everything was heavy. She'd spend days in her room, shades drawn, listening to sad music, acting like the world was ending because, I don't know, her favorite band broke up or something. Mom and Dad, bless their hearts. They were always so worried about her. Tracy, honey, are you okay? What's going on? And me, I'd just roll my eyes. It was annoying. Seriously? I was, like, trying to live my best life. And she was always bringing the whole mood down with her moping. I remember this one time, I must have been about 16, and she was, like, 20. She'd gone to some college party and apparently had a terrible time. Came home, locked herself in her room. Mom was knocking on the door, whispering, Tracy, please, just talk to us. And I just yelled, loud enough for her to hear, oh, for crying out loud. Tracy, just get over it. It's not that serious. Mom gave me the stink eye. But honestly, I didn't care. She was being dramatic. It's not like someone died. She just didn't have a good time at a party. Big deal. Later, I heard her on the phone with her friend, whispering about anxiety and depression. And I just scoffed. Anxiety? Depression. I told my friend Sarah, please. She just likes the attention. It's all for show. Sarah just nodded along, which is why I loved Sarah. She got it. She understood that sometimes people just need to toughen up. You know, my parents eventually got her into therapy for her mental health. They said, and I made fun of her mercilessly for it. So, what? You just pay someone to listen to you complain? I'd ask, laughing. Do they give you, like, a gold star for crying the most? She'd just stare at me, her eyes all watery, and then shuffle away. Which, of course, just proved my point. She couldn't even handle a little teasing. I had a boyfriend back then. Mark? He was pretty cool. We'd sneak out, go to parties, do stupid stuff. He thought Tracy was weird too. We'd be in my room, and if Tracy was having one of her episodes, as I called them, Mark would make a face and whisper, is she doing her crazy act again? And I'd just giggle. It was our inside joke. Yeah, it was probably not very nice, but she was always so fragile. It was like she invited it. Fast forward a few years. I'm out of college, working my first real job. Nothing fancy, just at an office, doing some admin stuff. It was fine. I met a guy there, Jake. He was sweet, kind of quiet, but in a nice way. He was the kind of guy who'd bring you coffee in the morning and remember your favorite kind. He was also a little bit of a too nice guy, if you know what I mean. Always trying to please everyone, avoiding conflict like it was the plague. But at the time, I liked that. It meant less drama, which was a good thing after dealing with Tracy my whole life. Our relationship was pretty good. We moved in together after about a year, shared an apartment, split the bills. Well, mostly split them. I mean, I made decent money, but I also had my own expenses, like my shopping habit and my nails. So, sometimes, he'd pick up a little extra on the rent or the groceries. It was fine. He never complained. Tracy, meanwhile, was still doing her therapy thing. But now, she wasn't just going to therapy. She was studying therapy. She was in grad school, getting her master's in counseling. I remember calling her one day and she was all excited, talking about empathy and active listening. I just listened, half-heartedly, while scrolling through my phone. That's nice, Tracy, I said, trying to sound supportive but probably failing. So, you're just going to listen to people complain all day. She got all defensive then, talking about helping people and breaking cycles. Whatever. Life with Jake was easy. Too easy. Maybe he was always doing nice things for me. And I kind of expected it. Like, if he didn't do something I wanted, I'd get all quiet. Not angry, just quiet. And he'd notice, what's wrong? Ash, he'd ask, all concerned. And I'd just sigh dramatically. Nothing. I'm fine. Which, of course, meant I wasn't fine at all. And he'd usually figure it out and try to fix whatever he thought was wrong. It worked. Why wouldn't it? We had our little spats, of course, mostly about silly stuff, like I'd ask him where he was going, and he'd tell me, and then he'd ask me the same thing. And I'd just be like, oh, just out with Sarah. He'd try to push for details, like, where are you going? Who are you meeting? And I'd get defensive. Why do you need to know every single thing? Are you, like, checking up on me? He'd always back down. He was so easy to read. Bless his heart. His face would go all soft and apologetic. Sometimes, if he really pushed, I'd even tear up a little. Just a little, enough to make him feel bad and drop it. Worked every time. I remember one time he was all excited about starting a new hobby, some kind of woodworking thing in his friend's garage. He was talking about how he wanted to make furniture and stuff. And I just, couldn't, woodworking. Really, it just sounded so boring and messy. And it meant he'd be spending time away from me. So I just said, oh, that's nice. Honey, but, don't you think it's a bit much? We don't have a lot of extra money right now. And that equipment looks expensive. Plus, wouldn't you rather, spend time with me? He looked a little deflated, but he eventually dropped it. He just really wanted to make me happy. He was such a good guy. I'd post stuff on Facebook about how amazing Jake was, how lucky I was. My perfect man. I'd caption a photo of us on a date, even if we'd just had a huge argument 10 minutes before. It was important to maintain appearances. You can't have people thinking your life isn't, picture perfect. But then, if Jake would post something about his friends or something that didn't include me, I'd get a little salty. Oh, so you're having fun without me? I'd ask, just a hint of a sneer in my voice. He'd always reassure me, say it was nothing, just a guy's night. But I'd keep an eye on his phone, just in case. Not that I'd ever look through it, because that's, an invasion of privacy. But I'd notice if he was getting a lot of texts from one person, or if he deleted a conversation. Just observing, Speaking of observing, I noticed Jake was getting more distant. Not physically distant, but emotionally, he'd be tired all the time. He'd nod when I was talking, but his eyes would be a million miles away. He stopped bringing me coffee. He stopped remembering my favorite kind. And if I'd try to get him to talk about it, he'd just shrug and say he was fine. Just stressed about work. I tried to get him to open up, but it was like pulling teeth. And then, when he wouldn't, I'd use it against him. See, you never talk to me anymore. You're shutting me out. You're just like my dad, always keeping secrets. Which, my dad was a pretty private guy, so it was a low blow, but it usually got a reaction. He'd get all flustered and try to explain himself. Things got worse. We started fighting more. Or rather, I started fighting, and he'd just shut down. I'd bring up past mistakes of his. Like that one time he forgot my birthday even though I had, given him a million hints. Or that other time he accidentally shrunk my favorite sweater in the dryer. I had a whole mental tally of every little thing he'd ever done wrong. And I'd use them as leverage. Remember when you did X? Well, this is just like that. He'd try to apologize, but I'd just keep going. Changing my expectations as we went. If he promised to do the dishes, and then he did them, I'd say, well, why didn't you also clean the kitchen counter? He just couldn't win. Sometimes I'd be super sweet and affectionate. And then the next minute, I'd be cold and distant. I called it keeping him on his toes. He called it confusing. Whatever. He just didn't understand how to appreciate me. I'd compare him to my friends' boyfriends. Sarah's boyfriend bought her flowers just because. Why don't you ever do that? I'd ask, making him feel inadequate. He'd try, he really would. He'd buy me flowers. But then I'd just say, oh, these are nice. But Sarah's were, a dozen roses. These are just daisies. It was a game, and I was winning. One night, we had a particularly bad fight. I was mad about something. I don't even remember what. And I just kept pushing him. I told him he was lazy, that he didn't care about me, that he was holding me back. And then I did something I knew would hit him where it hurt. I brought up something he'd confided in me about, something he was really insecure about. From his childhood, I saw his face crumple. He just stared at me, his eyes wide, and then he just walked away. He went into the bedroom and locked the door. I waited for him to come out and apologize, but he didn't. I banged on the door, but he didn't answer. Eventually, I just went to sleep on the couch, fuming. The next morning, he was still in the bedroom. I tried the door, still locked. I ended up just going to work. When I came back that evening, the door was still locked. I heard him moving around in there. This went on for a few days. He'd only come out when I was asleep or not home. He was barely eating. I heard him on the phone, quietly, talking to someone, I assumed it was his mom. I was starting to get annoyed. This was like a huge overreaction. So I decided to pull out the big guns. I threatened to break up with him. If you're not going to talk to me, then what's the point? Maybe we should just end this. I said it casually, leaning against the doorframe of the bedroom. I expected him to panic, to come out and beg me to stay. Instead, he just said, quietly, maybe you're right. I was stunned. What? I practically screamed. What did you just say? He opened the door then. His eyes were red-rimmed, but his expression was calm. Too calm? I said, maybe you're right. Ashley, maybe we should end this. I started to cry, big, dramatic sobs. How can you say that? After everything we've been through, I thought you loved me. I used my tears to avoid the real issue, which was his newfound calmness. It infuriated me. He was supposed to be upset, but it didn't work this time. He just stood there, looking at me with this pity in his eyes. Pity, like I was the problem. I do love you, Ashley, he said, his voice flat. But I can't do this anymore. I can't keep walking on eggshells. I can't keep feeling like nothing I do is ever good enough. I can't keep questioning my own sanity because you tell me I'm being dramatic when I'm upset. I was shaking my head, my tears flowing freely. You're making this all up. I never said that. You're just remembering things wrong. I tried to rewrite our entire history, making myself the victim. He just shook his head. I'm not making anything up. Ashley, and I'm not crazy. I've been talking to someone and they've helped me see things clearly. My blood ran cold. He'd been talking to someone who I immediately thought of some other woman. Who have you been talking to? Are you seeing someone else? Is that what this is about? He sighed. No, Ashley. I've been talking to a therapist. A therapist? My stomach dropped. A therapist? Like Tracy. That's why he was so calm. That's why he wasn't falling for my usual tricks. Some professional was, filling his head with nonsense. Probably telling him he was, a victim or something. So what? Now you're just gonna blame everything on me because some stranger told you to, I snapped, wiping my tears with the back of my hand. My vulnerability was gone, replaced by pure rage. He just looked at me, really looked at me, and said, no, Ashley, I'm just taking accountability for my own part in this, and recognizing that I can't be in a relationship where I'm constantly feeling invalidated and attacked. He ended it. Just like that. After all the effort I put in, all the times I made him feel good, all the times I let him pay for things. He just walked away. He didn't even pack a bag. He just left, said he'd come back for his stuff later. I remember him looking at me one last time, a flicker of something in his eyes, sadness, regret. And then he was gone. And I just stood there, in the middle of our living room, completely alone. The next few months were a blur. I was a mess. I tried to reach out to Jake, but he wouldn't answer my calls or texts. I tried to post passive-aggressive stuff on Facebook, but he'd blocked me. Can you believe it? Blocked me. After everything. My friends. Well, some of them tried to be supportive at first. Sarah was still on my side. Of course, he was never good enough for you anyway. Ash, she'd say, even though she used to tell me how lucky I was. But then, even Sarah started getting weird. I'd tell her about Jake, how he was, a narcissist, and she'd just listen, and then she'd change the subject. It was like no one wanted to hear the truth. They just wanted to pretend that I was the problem. My job started to go downhill too. I was constantly distracted, snapping at people. My boss pulled me into her office one day and told me my performance had been declining. You need to get it together. Ashley, she said, her voice stern. This isn't like you. I just nodded, pretending to be remorseful. But inside, I was fuming. It wasn't my fault. It was Jake's fault for leaving me. It was everyone else's fault for not understanding. Then, the true horror began. Financial stuff. When Jake and I were together, he covered a lot of the household expenses. Now, all of a sudden, I was on the hook for everything. Rent, utilities, car payment, groceries. It added up fast. And my shopping habit, forget about it. I had to cut back on everything. I had to get a second job, working retail on the weekends, just to make ends meet. Me working retail? It was humiliating. Every time someone asked me if I needed help finding something, I wanted to scream. And then I found out about Jake. Not from him, of course. From a mutual friend who, honestly, I suspect was trying to subtly rub it in my face. He was dating someone new, and she was different. Not, super pretty or anything. But she seemed nice, sweet. And apparently, she was really into all the things Jake loved. Like She actually enjoyed woodworking. He'd posted a picture of them in his friend's garage, both covered in sawdust, smiling. He looked happy, genuinely happy. Not that fake Facebook happy I used to post. I went into a full-blown meltdown. I called my mom, sobbing. He's replaced me. He found someone else. He never loved me. My mom, ever the peacemaker, tried to calm me down. Ashley, honey, you broke up. People move on, but she didn't understand. He wasn't supposed to move on so easily. He was supposed to be heartbroken and miserable, just like me. He was supposed to be begging me to take him back. Around that time, my car started making a funny noise. I ignored it for a while, hoping it would just go away, but it got worse. One morning, on my way to my retail job, it just died, right in the middle of a busy intersection. I was stranded. I called for a tow truck, and then I called my dad. He came and picked me up, but he was annoyed. Ashley, why didn't you get this looked at sooner? Now it's probably a huge problem. It was a huge problem. The mechanic said the engine was shot. It would cost thousands to fix. Thousands. I didn't have that kind of money. My dad offered to help, but he said I'd have to pay him back. And then he said something that really stung. You know, Ashley, if you had just taken care of things, this wouldn't have happened. You always expect someone else to fix your problems. That was the last straw. I snapped. It's not my fault. Nothing is my fault. It's all Jake's fault for leaving me. If he hadn't left, I wouldn't be in this situation. I was screaming, practically. My dad just looked at me, his face devoid of emotion. Ashley, he said, his voice quiet, but firm, you need help. And then he suggested it. Your sister knows someone. A good therapist? Maybe you should talk to her. A therapist. The word hung in the air like a bad smell. Yeah, go to therapy. The very thing I'd mocked Tracy for my entire life. The idea was repulsive. I refused. Of course. No. I'm not crazy. I don't need therapy. But my dad was insistent. He wouldn't let up. He kept hounding me. And then my mom joined in. Even Sarah, who had been my most loyal friend, started subtly hinting that maybe it would be a good idea. It was like everyone was ganging up on me. Finally, to shut them up, I reluctantly agreed to go to one session. Just one. To prove them all wrong, the therapist was fine. She was older, with kind eyes. She just listened, nodding occasionally. I talked about Jake, about my job, about my car, about my parents, about my friends, about how everyone was against me, how I was the victim, how unfair life was. I carefully omitted any details that might make me look bad. I was, after all, telling my story. At the end of the session, she said, very calmly, Ashley, I think there are some patterns here that we could explore together. It seems like you're experiencing a lot of distress, and it might be helpful to understand why I was annoyed. Patterns. What patterns? I was just having a bad run of luck, but my parents kept pushing. Just give it a try. Ashley, for us. So I grudgingly agreed to go back. It's been 6 months now. 6 months of sitting in that room, talking about myself. And let me tell you, it's not what I expected. She doesn't just listen and nod. She asks questions. Annoying questions. Questions that make you think. Questions that make you squirm. She asked me about my relationship with Jake. She asked me about how I handled arguments. She asked me about my relationship with Tracy. And that's where things really started to get uncomfortable. I told her about how Tracy was always so sensitive, how she'd cry over everything, how I made fun of her, and the therapist just listened, her face unreadable. Then she asked, and how do you think that made Tracy feel? I shrugged. I don't know. Annoyed? Probably. She just looked at me. Did you ever consider that she might have been genuinely struggling, and that your teasing might have made it harder for her to cope? I just stared at her. What was she saying? That I was, like, a bad sister. That was ridiculous. I was just trying to toughen her up. Then she started talking about coping mechanisms and emotional regulation and accountability. She kept circling back to this idea that I needed to take responsibility for my actions, for how I treated people, and I just wanted to scream. Why was she blaming me? I was the one who was hurting. One day, I was telling her about how unfair it was that Jake was so happy with his new girlfriend, and how I was the one struggling. And she just looked at me and said, very gently, Ashley, do you see the connection between your actions and the consequences you're experiencing? My blood ran cold. The connection? What connection? I had, like, a string of bad luck. That's all. She continued, you've described a pattern of invalidating Jake's feelings, manipulating him, and using his insecurities against him. Now, you feel replaced and isolated. You've described mocking your sister's mental health struggles. and now you're experiencing your own, and the person you mocked is in a position to help others with theirs. You discouraged Jake's hobbies, and now he's found someone who shares them and is thriving. Do you see the cycle? I didn't want to see the cycle. I didn't want to see any of it. But it was like she was shining a spotlight on every single rotten thing I'd ever done. And it was all there, right in front of me. The way I treated Jake, the way I treated Tracy, the way I treated everyone, it was all coming back to bite me. Hard. Now, I'm still going to therapy. My car is still broken. I'm still working 2 jobs. My apartment is full of dusty boxes because I can't afford to replace the furniture Jake took. And Jake, he's engaged to that woodworking girl. I saw it on Facebook. A picture of them, smiling, with a shiny ring on her finger. And Tracy, she's like a hugely successful therapist. She even wrote a book about, you guessed it, empathy and healthy relationships. She's on podcasts. She's on TV sometimes. She's like living her best life, helping people, while I'm stuck here, taking a handful of pills every morning just to get through the day. Do I regret what I did? No. I regret how things turned out. I regret that I'm the one who's medicated and struggling, while Tracy is living the dream. I regret that Jake found someone else. It's also unfair. Everyone else is to blame. Everyone else messed up my life. And I'm still here, stuck, while everyone else gets to move on. It's not fair. Not fair at all. And honestly, I don't care anymore. Let them have their happy endings. I'm just trying to survive and maybe, just maybe, figure out how to get my car fixed. It's always something, isn't it?